I'm joined now by Sourabh Gupta. He's a senior Asia-Pacific International Relations Policy Specialist at the Institute for China-American Studies, a think tank here in Washington, D.C. Sourabh, always great to see you.
Hello, Elaine.
Well, first I want to get your reaction to President Xi's speech to these foreign ministers of the BRICS nations. What do you think his main message was? What was he really trying to convey as these meetings get underway?
I think his main message was was a stabilizing message. There's so many divisions in the world right now, and of course there's an ongoing war at this point of time. We don't need more division and more fighting, and rather than us versus them mentality, we need to find a way forward where all parties can come together. I think he wanted to see that at least South-South cooperation can be maintained, that the basic unity can be maintained, and that the development goals of the emerging markets and countries in the South can be prioritized even at this difficult time.
Do you think they can keep their ideals in place when you're talking about security, the impact of the pandemic, and of course, you mentioned Russia, Ukraine. Russia is a BRICS member. So if you can, let's look at each of those issues right now.
Yes, I think it can be, because what we're talking about is trying to support multilateralism. Yes, there is a very specific conversation to be had in that context about Ukraine, Russia, and about the violation of international law, which has set back not just the rule of law, but also the purposes of multilateralism, because as we see, countries are now getting into bloc formations and trying to push forward their foreign and economic security policies. But in the longer run, the case for prosperity in the developing world will be one of the anchors of stability in this global order, in spite of what is happening in parts of the world. I'm talking in terms in Europe. And I think from that perspective, I think there's a unity and a uniformity even in advanced economies, that at this difficult time we must find economic prosperity, or at least economic stability going forward. And I think with so many of these unilateral sanctions which have been enforced, there is a real fear of the breakdown of the integrity of the basic international economic order, and I think there's a priority on their part to try to stabilize and find ways forward so that we can all work together and not be at each other's throats in the way we are, frankly.
And what about when it comes to growth? Because there is discussion about the potential expansion of BRICS. Argentina is being mentioned here. President Xi has indicated that he wants more developing countries to join. So what is the benefit of growing BRICS?
I think the benefit of growing BRICS is it's not a difficult decision to take, though that it's difficult to find consensus within the BRICS countries as to how and who are the parties that are going to be brought in. You know, this conversation has been there for a while about how doing a BRICS plus and trying to bring other emerging markets into BRICS and strengthening South-South cooperation. And that's why we see that this diversity of participants from Latin America, from Africa, from Asia being invited in. You know, Thailand is the APEC chair also this year. And so it's an important conversation to be had. A consensus is required in this regard. And remember, emerging markets are also at very different stages of their economic development, and that actually enhances the plurality of views of how reform of the system can happen, rather than having it kind of hammered down by just 2 or 3 very powerful countries in the global south. So I think it's useful to bring them in, but it's also important to note that BRICS should also not become a bloc as such, a bloc of the global south, because that will just hurt the entire process of what it is aiming at in having broad-based multilateralism and hopefully greater respect for the rule of law, which unfortunately has been lacking of late.
Always great to get your take, Sourabh Gupta. Thank you so much for joining us.